Welcome. The Pathway to 17 Summit is a global virtual event focused on bringing together thought leaders, problem solvers, innovators, industry experts, and practitioners working to solve the world's greatest challenges and drive progress for the SDGs. Our focus today is on innovative and inclusive fintech, and the stream has been cultivated by the Alliance of Digital Finance and Fintech Associations. Alliance DFA is a global hub uniting regional and national associations to foster knowledge exchange, create synergies, and amplify impact in the digital finance and fintech sector. By empowering our members resources to impact local markets, Alliance DFA strengthens the digital finance ecosystem globally, enabling the development of inclusive and responsible digital financial products and services. I am Dr. Dee Allen, a board member of Alliance DFA, a senior fintech and financial innovation lecturer, and an academic advisor to the Teesside University of Cambridge Judge Business School. The panel session is focusing on generative AI in fintech, driving innovation or bringing risk. First, let me introduce our three distinguished panelists, starting with Alex Rizzi of USAID. Alex has more than 15 years working at the intersection of social impact, financial inclusion, responsible tech, and research. She's currently a senior advisor at USAID on the digital financial services team, which supports agency programming and influences the broader development community. Prior to USAID, Alex spent nearly 12 years at the Center for Financial Inclusion at Axion International. Next is Tshifhiwa Thavhana from Inclusivity Solutions. Tshifhiwa is a seasoned product manager with 15 plus years of experience in tech and finance. He specializes in building innovative solutions that empower underserved communities. His expertise lies in product development, process improvement, and strategic partnerships. And last but not least, Christian Limawan from AIForesee. Christian is the CEO of AIForesee, an innovative credit scoring company based in Indonesia that leverages alternative data and machine learning algorithms targeting lending institutions that offer productive loans for MSMEs. Prior to leading AIForesee, he was the business development manager for special projects at OVO e-money company in Indonesia, while he started his career as business consultant at CRIF, which is a multinational credit bureau company that's from Italy. But he was based in Indonesia with the latest role as regional business consultant for CRIF in Southeast Asia. So welcome to our panelists and welcome to everyone to this very exciting session. So on our topic for the day, from revolutionizing customer experiences to streamlining business and creating innovation and financial products, AI's potential seems limitless. However, with these advancements in AI, we have concerns around privacy, ethical issues, and regulatory compliance issues. So I'm going to start the first question with Christian, one of our panelists. Christian, can you start with us by setting the scene? What exactly is generative AI?
That's a big question. Thank you, Dr. D, for the question and inviting me as one of the panelists here. In my view, I think before diving into Gen AI, it would be appropriate to just touch base on what's artificial intelligence itself, because Gen AI is a subset of AI. So as the name itself explains, artificial intelligence is basically an intelligence that is created by a machine. So it's an artificial based on a certain algorithm. It can generate output, be it predictable or unpredictable, supervised or unsupervised, depending on the algorithm and the input data that is being composed. Now, when I try to understand AI or even before going into Gen AI, I think a quick analogy is observing a growing baby. As I myself just had a 6 months old daughter, it's very obvious to observe day by day that this newborn could learn something new as we teach them, either words or movements or even eating. some new skills that they generate as they receive new input, and the brain, processes and then could generate an output of themselves. So I think in a broad manner speaking, that's the AI. Now, generative AI, it's a buzzword everywhere, all around the world. In any industry is adopting Gen AI. It's essentially a subset of AI that is basically able to generate a prompt. Based on a certain prompt, it could generate an output, be it text to image, text to video. I think most of us as the end users would find it fun, entertaining, at recreational usage at the beginning, especially recently, right, with the boom of, if I could quote, ChatGPT. Now everybody's talking about ChatGPT. That's a part of Gen AI based on a certain prompt. The text could be generated, and actually we could interact as if it's talking to a normal human being, but on a screen on a computer. So that's just one example. There are many other use cases on generating images, videos. We might have seen many pictures circulated, especially during election time. Certain politician figures somehow could be put together in one room and so on. So I think, in short, that's more or less the context of Gen AI. Now I think it will be interesting to um, hear the conversations in this hour regarding the ethics, the background around it, implications, because I think Gen AI goes beyond the recreational. There are many use cases, benefits that organizations can absorb and streamline their business processes, as well as possible risks that I hope, and I'm keen to hear other panelists' views on this too.
Brilliant, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that very simple explanation of what Gen AI is. So I'm going to go on to the next question. And Tshifhiwa, that's for you. What ways are you seeing Gen AI being used in the finance sector?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dee, for inviting us here as Inclusivity Solutions. From our side, I believe that the financial institutions, and to be specific, because we focus on the insurance side of things, is that Gen AI is becoming one of the best tools that insurance companies, to be specific, insurtech, fintechs will use in the future to make sure that they impact their customers in a way that traditional financial institutions have not been able to. So you can think of customer service. Previously, we would have to make a phone call to an insurance company to query something about my product, which would take roughly 10, 20 minutes, waiting for someone on the other side to answer the call so that I can sort of present my case so that they can answer. But currently, we are able to just, through our fingertips, ask a question, and then you get a response immediately without having to speak to anyone. And this is the power of Gen AI, because the response that I get is just as good as being written by another human. And this is through a lot of training that as institutions, we have to train these models to make sure that when they respond back, they are responding as if I was speaking to another human being. And that's one of the use cases where financial institutions are going to utilize this is enhancing customer service. That's priority. That's key to make sure that customers stay within those institutions. Now, one of the biggest one that a lot of people have been asking for is whenever we go and discuss a partnership with either an insurance company or a financial institution, is things like fraud detection. Can you help us detect fraud? And it's critical because fraud is one of the biggest use cases, and it's one of the things that have been sort of eating from the bottom line when it comes to insurance companies and financial institutions. Now, if we can build algorithms with the help of Gen AI to detect fraud, it will help a lot in making sure that companies are not leaking any revenue because of fraud that is occurring. There's other things that I could speak of, like personalized financial advice that could be given to an individual based on prompts that the system could prompt me and ask me, what am I looking for today? What type of problem am I trying to solve? Based on those prompts or questions that you ask a person, the system is able to generate or allow me to or advise me on a product that will be suitable for the needs that I have. So there are many use cases that financial institutions are able to make use of Gen AI in the future. And I think the mistake that a lot of organizations make is, well, this thing is here, it's a big buzzword right now, and it will pass and will continue. We have our experts on the ground. But to be honest with you, it's not going anywhere. It's staying. And I believe that unless we adopt, we'll be left behind. And when we're left behind, we'll just suffer the consequences of losing revenue. So I think it's critical that organizations jump on this bandwagon and move on with the times. Yeah, so there's a lot of enhancement when it comes to customer service, fraud detection, and also assisting when it comes to risk assessment. I think something that as tech, because I speak from a tech perspective, I'm a very techy person. Something that we don't really focus on is like risk assessment. You find that in the end of it all, when it comes to audits, that's one of the places where we fail, because we failed to allow Gen AI to help us, customize our models to make sure that our models are fit from a risk perspective, that whenever we get audits, well, we are ready from a financial perspective, because we've built the model to cater for such risks. So there's a lot of use cases where financial institutions can utilize Gen AI. It's just a matter of assessing where your greatest need is at and how you can help leverage the tool to basically enhance customer experience in the end. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tshif, for this great examples of how AI can be utilized in the finance sector. Wonderful. So I'm going to move on to Alex. Alex, I've got a couple of questions for you. And this is, what potential does Gen AI have in financial services and fintech? And how can Gen AI contribute to reaching more consumers and addressing financial inclusion in particular?
Thanks, Dr. Allen, and thanks to the Pathway to 17 Summit and Alliance DFA for the invitation to be here. And also congratulations, Christian, on the newest member of your family. I hope you're getting some sleep. Yeah, from a financial inclusion perspective, I think digital finance has made huge advances in the last decade in financial inclusion, particularly through mobile money. We now have 76% of adults who have account ownership in mobile money account, bank, credit union, and that jumped really more than 50% from 2011 to 2021, and I suspect we'll see more gains. But there's still large gaps. We have 1.4 billion people who are underserved, who are excluded from the formal financial system, and many more who are underserved. And at USAID, we believe that digital technology can continue to close this gap. It has helped in the past. That can come from investments in digital connectivity infrastructure, but also from tools like generative AI. We feel have the potential to bridge some of the remaining gap to increase inclusion. And I'd say the potential falls into, maybe three buckets. One is the potential to bring efficiencies and lower operational costs for providers. Some Tshifhiwa was talking about, to help reach those last mile customers, the 1.4 billion who are excluded. We see the potential for generative AI to help on the demand side, to help customers themselves overcome barriers in accessing and using digital financial services. And we also see the potential of generative AI as a tool for the market, particularly for regulators or supervisors, to monitor and supervise markets, to help build a more trusted financial ecosystem. And all of that, I think, can help lead to more inclusion. So a few examples on the bucket one, increasing efficiency and lowering operational costs. I think one of the benefits of generative AI is that it can look at huge troves of unstructured data to extract relevant information to help make decisions. And some interesting use cases in that can be lowering the cost of doing KYC, knowing your customer, which is traditionally quite time and labor intensive process that needs a lot of different points of data and paperwork, can often lead to high rejection rates. Using Gen AI powered solutions can help reduce those costs and increase outreach. Related to that is the cost of doing anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing compliance costs. We're really excited about certain use cases in this, particularly in the context of decreasing the cost of doing remittances. Generative AI, as Christian was saying earlier, perhaps the one that everyone's most excited about or is most familiar with are the kind of language, kind of chat interface. But generative AI can also help write code, and code is so important for many different functions in fintechs, user authentication, UX, UI design, transaction processing, and lowering the cost of that can help increase the potential to reach new consumers, and also the cost of making decisions like underwriting for credit or for insurance. These are all really exciting, I think, ways to lower costs and increase outreach. Tshifhiwa talked a little bit about the second bucket, where we see Gen AI and the potential to overcome some demand side constraints. And many consumers in the last mile, the 1.4 billion, have had constraints and barriers in terms of financial knowledge, financial education, financial literacy. Unfortunately, in our field, there have been a lot of interventions in the past, financial education and literacy interventions that have a somewhat checkered empirical kind of track record of actually helping consumers learn new information, make new decisions. But I think Gen AI can be such a game changer in the way that it can develop personalized content for users to guide them through onboarding, understanding product terms and conditions, can help, beyond even customers, can help field agents or mobile money agents answer questions that customers have. And really, I think the personalization aspect is quite powerful, whether it's through chat or maybe even videos in the future, to help consumers and agents increase their knowledge about different aspects of a financial transaction. On other aspects of the customer journey, it could help in debt collection, with chatting with consumers and understanding why they're late, why the repayments aren't happening, could help in borrower segmentation, and could help in complaints resolution. I think certain customers, certain marginalized groups have been reticent or unable to access and properly use grievance redressal mechanisms that providers have. And this, Gen AI could help prompt, engage to get relevant information for them to help resolve the issues, and also help providers spot trends in user experiences or issues that they're having. And then on the third bucket, at the regulatory level, I think Gen AI has the potential to help regulators and supervisors improve the quality of supervision, looking at vast amounts of information from the market, whether it relates to consumer protection issues, fraud detection, and all of that can help build a more trustworthy financial ecosystem that can help increase trust in the system and usage of digital finance. So a lot of these, I said potential, and because we've seen a lot of pilots and a lot of kind of small scale use cases, but I'm really excited to see some of those come to scale. I don't think that this is a panacea to close the financial inclusion gap. I think it's a tool that we can use. There needs to be other investments as well to help, bridge that last 1.4 billion. But very excited about some of these ideas.
Great, thank you. Indeed, AI, Gen AI is got great potentials, as we're all discussing, potential game changer, as we're saying, something we can't avoid. is something which everyone is now using, and financial services and fintechs will be no different. There's great opportunities for us to use AI. So thanks for your answers so far. Just want to mention to the audience, please feel free to use the chat to pose any questions that you may have, and I'll come back to those questions. But moving on, I'm going to go back to Christian. And with Christian, I'd like to ask you, how is AIForesee using Gen AI?
Okay. So for a little bit of context to everyone, AIForesee is basically again, innovative credit score company. So we basically deal more with data for the context of credit score, especially using alternative data sources, the likes of telco data, social media, payments, tax data, essentially non-credit data, to target the underserved segment, which in any case doesn't really have a lot of credit history data in the traditional credit bureau. So that's our core product. Now, I think about a year and a half ago, one of our clients, actually, when we had a conversation, the risk team actually shared their experience in which, unfortunately, they've been misled or misapproved a borrower who was affiliated with a group. It's a business entity because they're targeting SME. This borrower was affiliated with a group that was ongoing on judicial court. And at some point after the loan was approved, because the group was didn't win the case, they had to either pay the fines or some sort of business interruptions that affected the actual borrower that got approved. So after getting this feedback, we were wondering how could we help this client streamline their KYC, KYB process. And that was when we learned that in Indonesia, the judicial court system is technically open for public to access, but it's very fragmented. So there are more than 370 courts in Indonesia, and it's somewhat grouped in different provinces. Each province has its own website. So if you have a case in one, let's say in Jakarta, the capital, and if your borrower is actually based in West Java, and judicial court, let's say, is happening in West Java, you wouldn't be able to detect if you were checking from Jakarta court system. So there is a big gap and fragmented data sources, and we thought of how can we integrate these different data sources and help the clients to expedite, to streamline their review process. And that's when we experimented with Gen AI, in particular for text summarization. So each system basically generates all of the information about every court hearings that happen in their own judicial geography. What we did was we tried to integrate and kind of inquire all the information and then simplified it based on the identifier of the business entity or the borrower applying. So in a way, it's like a search engine in a layman's term, but in particular for litigation or negative information data. I think our use case is a bit different in a sense that we are more of like a B2B business model, slightly different from Tshifhiwa's case, right? InsurTech dealing with B2C for customer support. But even for B2B, we realized with this prototype, it also works to implement some sort of Gen AI in our product development. Now, if I may share the learnings, again, as my previous response, it's a big thing. Everyone is trying to experiment with it. But our learning was the biggest time or effort that we spent was understanding the data. So it's not really right at the technical level. It was more on we need to understand how do we make sense of this data, which again, like Alex's point, it's unstructured mostly. And second learning, I think a unique thing was sometimes when we deal with language or text, we would immediately think that the native speakers would understand better. But in our case, it's true, we understood the language, we understood the context, but it was mostly legal languages that the data scientist team might not be familiar. So there was still additional learning to understand the data, make sense of the context, And then the third thing is experiment with the actual algorithms and different ways to streamline and extract values out of the data. It took us some time and we're still learning. I think the point here is, despite the potentials, I think it's still a journey for different organizations to adopt, to be able to hopefully maximize the context and use case to each other's value proposition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the great case study on AIForesee, especially talking about the data challenges and the language barriers and all that. So it's a learning process, and it's really good to hear that you are dealing with the challenges, but Gen AI is still being used as a tool for your organization. So I'm going to move on to Tshifhiwa as well now, and I'm going to ask you, Tshif, how is Inclusivity Solutions using Gen AI?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dee. So maybe just to give a little bit of context of who we are and why we operate the way we operate. As Inclusivity, we're very passionate about making insurance accessible to everyone in Africa. And I like the way Alex was pointing back to the numbers. In Africa itself, 97% of the population have no access to insurance at all. And mostly it's because they can't access it and it's not affordable. So one of the things that we do is we help create affordable products and accessible products. And how we make them accessible is that we partner with already existing infrastructures, like your telcos, your banks, and almost every single individual has some phone of some sort, whether it's a smartphone or a feature phone, it's okay. What we have really done well was to develop the flagship USSD platform that everyone can access through their phone to be able to access insurance. And with partnership with telcos, that has really accelerated the insurance penetration in the continent. Just to give maybe some context, with one of the countries like Ethiopia, where only 0.5% of the population is insured. That's like 1% out of every 200 people. That's very small. So people can only dream about having access to insurance. Now, with that being said, yes, we are able to distribute insurance in mass and all that. But when it comes to insurers, because we work with insurers, the biggest challenge that we've seen is that it takes time to look at a claim. When someone logs a claim, it takes a lot of time for them to go and do an assessment and eventually pay out, which in turn, they lose trust from customers. And that's a big thing, because that individual that we have worked so hard to try and bring on board is now having a bad experience because the claim process is taking 5-10 days. And you find that the payout is so small that we shouldn't be taking so long to process such a claim. I remember one incident where we had a claim in Zambia. There was actually somebody that passed away, but they were in a village. And in this instance, the insurer would have to go to the village itself to validate whether there is somebody that passed away in that area, because the type of documentation that they use is not formal documents that you can maybe ping against a Home Affairs department to see that there is a death certificate. This will be in a form of a letter from a chief to validate that there is indeed a funeral in that home and this is the person that passed away. So such experience can in turn demotivate people from taking up insurance. Now, to help with that, what we have done is that we have studied how assessors who assess claims work in terms of what type of documentation they look out for. What do they look out for in those documents? And then we then trained our AI model to say, these are the things that you should look out for. in certain areas, you will not have a formal document, but if a document comes like in this format, it should at least have some form of a signature. And what we did, we took some of the old claims that they have approved, claims that they've declined. I mean, we took those documents and then we trained our model so that it can validate claims when they come in. With what we have done so far, with the model or training our model, is we have reduced the amount of time it takes from about 10 days to 10 seconds. Now imagine after submitting your documents and you are able to receive a response, either via an SMS or some form of a response to say, hey, Alex, your claim has been assessed and we're just waiting confirmation so that money can be processed into your mobile money account, as the majority of Africans are utilizing mobile money. That is a game changer because now people begin to have faith in the insurance product that no one actually has faith in, because they think that insurance is only meant for the rich and insurance will never pay out. But if an assessment can be done at the same time when you submit your documents and you are able to receive a response, that's something that is changing insurance in the whole continent. People are beginning to have faith in the product. They're beginning to speak about it, and it's no longer taboo to speak about an insurance product, because now we know that insurers will pay and they will pay on time. It's not a matter of waiting for 10 days and being investigated to really like, okay, send us your bank statement. We want to see, send us this document. So we have really leveraged on this technology to make sure that we expedite the process of assessing claims, which previously would have taken a couple of days, is now taking a couple of seconds. And that's something that as Inclusivity, we worked very hard on. And we're working with all the insurers that we work with in the 9 countries where we are operating currently in Africa, to say, let's move from the traditional method of trusting a person to do the claim assessment. We can trust AI to do claim assessment. I know from an adoption perspective, this is still a long way to go. So we have developed in such a way that the insurers themselves can choose from a fully automated model to a manual model. The manual model, what it will do, basically, it gives you a recommendation to say, look, this claim has come through. We have assessed it, and we believe that the claim should not be approved because we suspect a fraudulent activity with a particular document. This allows then the actual assessor to go and assess that specific document that AI has highlighted, to say, okay, the AI is saying there could be something wrong with an actual ID. Let me verify if AI is indeed accurate. And that has actually reduced in terms of fraud. It has reduced in terms of the time it would have taken for someone to do an assessment, and also accuracy. Now guys are able to do an assessment in a more accurate way than they would have done before. So that's something that we're really working hard on, and bringing everyone that is out there to say, come on board, let's do this together. We're here to help gain trust from the market when it comes to an insurance product perspective.
Wonderful. Wow. Taking from 10 days to 10 seconds. It's just an amazing, great example there of how you're using Gen AI in your organization. Thank you, Christian and Tisha, for the brilliant case studies. I'm now going to focus on the risks side of Gen AI. And I'm going to go to Alex and to ask this question, Alex, what are the risks posed by Gen AI? And how can the industry ensure ethical usage of Gen AI and avoid unintended discrimination?
Yeah, that's big question. And I think as a development agency, USAID, and as part of the digital finance team, which is part of the technology division, we are so excited about the potential of Gen AI, but we also are very keen to potential risks to vulnerable populations, and really stress the importance of building an open, inclusive, and rights-respecting digital finance ecosystem. So I think, with some of the concerns in Gen AI are, I would say similar to non-Gen AI, but some are also, I think, quite distinct. So, the risks around bias and exclusion, and whether the decisions of Gen AI, further the digital divide, I think are, raising those, I would say, in a similar way that we did and do in non-Gen AI use cases. And that gets to questions around what's the data that's used to train the model? How representative is it of the population you're trying to serve? Are the teams that are building the models aware of potential bias and discrimination? I think, similar issues. Christian mentioned, which was the new twist, kind of the legal language, the difficulty of that in the Indonesian context. I think with language, a lot of the models are trained in English, and maybe they have, our understanding is they may have kind of capabilities in other languages, but they often aren't as accurate or as helpful. A colleague of mine wrote a blog about, testing an agricultural, like a chatbot, a Gen AI chatbot in Pakistan to help with agricultural extension services. And when they asked it a question in English about where to farm a certain crop in a certain part of Pakistan, it gave this very kind of agronomic answer, and it was very specific. But then when he asked it in Urdu, it gave something that was like vaguely poetic, like plant the seed under the light of a full moon or something. And so, like, it made him wonder what data was trained, how is this model trained with Urdu? And so I think, the outputs are not always the same, and you really have to probe those models. I think there are other kind of risks that we're quite concerned about, in the same kind of the flip side of the amazing potential to personalize content, for consumers, for financial education, awareness, for customer support. Some of that can be used for nefarious purposes. We heard from a colleague and a partner in Nigeria of digital lenders that were using Gen AI to generate fake images of borrowers in compromising positions to pressure them to repay, and then sending those fake images to friends and family and their contacts. Really horrible and kind of shame-inducing. And we see that also in the context of fake and sexually explicit depictions of women and girls. So that's quite horrible and could have really terrible consequences. They're also, beyond providers using those tactics, there are also just kind of fraudulent actors out there who are using scams. I think we've all heard of some of the fake voice AI scams that people can generate a voice that sounds like a loved one or something to try to extract money, and so that's, and target vulnerable populations. Interestingly, even in preparing for this, I heard from a colleague about consumers using Gen AI to try to scam insurance providers, for instance, like generating a fake image of a crashed motorcycle or something to say that their car had been, or their vehicle had been damaged. So I think fraud claims can come from all angles. And an open question I have is about the value chain of generative AI, and kind of where liability sits, and would love to hear Tshifhiwa and Christian, their thoughts on this too. When a lot of the models are built using a small number of companies' tools, like OpenAI, Llama, and then you fine tune it with your own data, and something goes wrong or amiss, where does that kind of liability fall? Who is sort of accountable for that mistake and that risk? And so I think all of these problems can lead to undermine trust, can lead to consumer harm, can lead to disengagement from some of the really powerful tools and use cases that we've talked about that can really help increase financial inclusion. And I think we can talk more about what different actors can do, but I think industry and those in a position to support industry, like donors and investors, should make sure to support, incentivize, and influence their partners to build in guardrails, to monitor for some of these harms, and to incentivize good practice. So those are a few thoughts on the risks.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. It's quite fascinating to see that risk would come also from the consumers, and that there's a high risk for misinformation and deep fakes, including the use of voice and fake pictures to make claims. So it's fascinating to hear these risks. I'd like to bring the other members of the panel, Christian and Tshif, and for us to talk about how can we mitigate the risks from Gen AI. I'll go to Christian first, Tshif, and then Alex, you can join in as well. Let's have a conversation. How can we mitigate these risks that we're talking about?
I think while thinking about this question, the first thing that crossed my mind was to be honest, in a sense that, whether it's something that our organization, be it a fintech, in lending, insurance, or supporting ecosystem like us, credit scoring, whether it really is something that we need to serve our clients. Then the second layer would be, what are their pain points? Are we really able to use or adopt Gen AI to solve those pain points? Or is there a simpler way, for instance? Because if we're not able to control the, let's say, possible implications and risks, like Alex mentioned, it could go a long way to hurt our organizations, the trust within the industry, and potentially at national or even bigger scale. The last thing that, if I may share in our experience, is probably it's a bit counterintuitive. It's not really about the technical aspect, but I would say the best way to mitigate is to have diversity in the room or in the team who is involved in designing the product or the algorithms or the use cases that we plan on launching. Be it diversity in a sense that, if our target market is international, then it would be best to have representation from different region that the end users would come from. Or if the case is, let's say, like Indonesia, it's domestic. Our use case is still national, Indonesia only. But there are different regions, provinces that would behave differently. If we have those perspectives coming in while designing the use cases, the products, then it should be less likely the output of the product would bring the unwanted implications. At least some of those voices have been represented during the product ideation and iteration.
Brilliant. Important to have that diversity in there and to reduce the risk of bias, as you were saying there, which is brilliant. Over to you, Tshif, your views on how we can mitigate the risks from Gen AI.
Yeah, I think from our side, and I remember doing a presentation with one of the insurers where we were trying to get them on board. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that anyone who wants someone to utilize their latest technology to say, oh, by the way, this is gonna like reduce your like manpower and so forth. So I believe that it's important to always have human oversight. So regardless of us having this great technology, we need human oversight, because you still need some level of decision that humans can make. Because AI or generative AI only knows so much that has been fed to it. And if we don't have enough data that we're feeding the model, you still require some level of human intervention to come and make a decision. So if you completely remove the aspect of human beings in the process, that's where you're gonna get it wrong. And the only way to reduce the high level of risk is to make sure that there's human oversight to maintain, because there's always gonna be some complex models that and decision making that we need to make, which may require someone else to come and make the decision. Because we actually, when we started, we realized that AI, the platform that we had developed was so strict that it will reject almost everything because nothing matched the standard as it should be according to, let's say, the product terms and conditions. Like, no one can provide you the exact documentation that you require. So you need to sort of now bring in the human aspect to say, okay, how do we relax this specific rule? What type of things should we then be looking at to make sure that it's not always rejecting everything or approving everything for that matter. So there is a need to always have somebody having an oversight over the system. And I think the second thing I think would be on my side to make sure that we stay up to date with regulations. Lawmakers are always changing laws. They're updating the rules when it comes to data privacy, KYC, POPI Acts, and all these rules that are changing. So if as tech people, we are not in line with what is happening outside of our own organization, and we're not up to date with what lawmakers are making, then we run the risk of utilizing the system incorrectly. So it's important to make sure that we stay up to date with current regulations that are happening within different regions. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. That human oversight point is very important as well. And so over to you, Alex, for your perspective as well on this point.
Yeah, I just want to really appreciate Christian and Tshifhiwa's points. I think the diverse teams, the human oversight, really important. And on the human oversight piece too, I think those that support fintechs and startups need to keep that in mind too. Investors and donors, in terms of the expectations that these tools will drastically cut costs and allow for smaller staff, a smaller team, but recognizing that, as he was saying, you need that human oversight. You need, I think, the especially for tools that are being newly deployed. I think Microsoft has that, what is it called, Copilot, but I just like that phase, or like that metaphor of kind of a Copilot. You have the Gen AI tool, but you also have a human in the loop as well to help make oversight. And so investors need to understand the importance of that, when supporting these deployments. On the regulation piece, I think just to add a bit to that, I think it is changing. You have different markets adopting AI frameworks. You have the EU AI Act, which will, let's see if that has the Brussels effect in terms of the same way that it did for GDPR in influencing other markets. But I would encourage providers, to the extent that they feel comfortable in industry, to engage with regulators to help shape that regulation for AI. I think everyone is learning, and you don't want to have an overreach on the side of regulators in terms of compliance that squelches innovation that they are still themselves learning about. While at the same time, you need to look for ways to protect against some of these harms. And so, to the extent that there can be industry regulatory collaboration sandboxes, I think there's some interesting work in Singapore that's been going on with the Monetary Authority of Singapore and the banking industry, in terms of the way they're developing principles for responsible AI and Gen AI. I think that kind of collaboration is important because we're all learning at the same time, including the public policymakers. So yeah, just my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. And indeed, you're right. We need to be able to balance regulation with innovation, and the regulatory sandbox is a great sort of response, a great tool that we can use to test beds for generative AI researchers and companies to experiment and sort of look at how they comply with the regulations, but at the same time see what impact they can have with customers. So a great suggestion in terms of regulatory sandboxes. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex, Christian, Tshifhiwa, for your great answers and responses to the questions. I'm now going to go to the Q&A part of our session. I've got some questions in the chat, which I'd like to pose. And when I ask the question, it'd be great to get responses from Christian, Tshifhiwa, and Alex. So starting with the question from Conrad Cornelius. He said, greetings. Before we can maximize data for progress initiatives, we should have enough data to feed the machine. How do we increase data availability, in particular in the Caribbean? So, Christian, maybe you can come to that because you talked about data being a challenge and see what your response to that, and then Tshifhiwa and Alex.
I obviously am not that familiar with the landscape of data in Caribbean, but I would guess there are some similarities in Indonesia. What we did was we basically took the effort to stitch together. We tried to partner with different data sources. It took us quite a while. Let's say the likes of telco, and the engagement would be we would try to partner with each provider, knowing that telco would have the biggest coverage. So that was our starting point. Then slowly we try to identify where are the other data points, be it those that are held privately by certain platforms that have big population or of users, or those that are available publicly. Then we have a team whose job is to explore from these two sources. The first source, the privately held data, would obviously come from partnerships. It took us some time to engage, finding the right PIC, commercial negotiation, eventually until technical integration before being able to learn from the data. Second team would try to understand the publicly available data. In the case of publicly available data, I think the most common approach would be to crawl the data, which probably comes into a ethical questions, whether it's actually allowed, is it not allowed, especially when it comes to some data that might indicate some person or identity of a person. I think that was our learning. Just to give you concrete measurement, the reason why I said it took us quite some time was, let's say with several data providers, we only established the official engagement after probably a year and a half or a year of conversations. So that was the kind of effort that we did. Our firm belief is this is the foundation. It's like an infrastructure. Once we've established these different bridges or branches of data, the return of investment would come after we serve the B2B clients. That is our case, in a sense that everyone is trying to find the data, but no one is really willing to be the stitcher or the tailor to kind of connect these different data points. That was our effort. I could go on and on, but probably I will pause here.
Yeah, we are running out of time. No, thank you so much for the answer and how you're approaching this data challenge. Because we're running out of time, I'm going to jump to the next question, which I think is for USAID. So it's for you, Alex. Sorry, Tshifhiwa, I'm going to come back to you before we close. This question is from Chris Wolf, Alex, and saying, with AI tech evolving so rapidly and a diverse value chain with different types of private, government, and NGO players, how is USAID now thinking about supporting the proliferation of different tools for digital development, like digital health, digital AG, digital finance, in a way that makes tech tools sustainable? It's a long question. We may not have enough time to answer that, or we may have to do it offline. But if you've got any thoughts in this last few seconds that we have, it would be great to get your response, Alex.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I would just point just in the last few seconds, in June of this year, we released a new digital policy, which talks about open, inclusive, and rights respecting digital ecosystems. We also launched the Global AI Playbook, which talks a lot about how to address some of these challenges at an ecosystem level, because that's the way that USAID approaches some of these problems, and whether it's building capacity among local populations in terms of AI related skills to help improve the sustainability, broadening access to data storage and computing resources, creating locally representative data sets. So thinking about sustainability at an ecosystem level is sort of our approach. And so sorry to wrap up abruptly, but I'd point you in the direction of the Global AI Playbook and the digital policy to elaborate more on some of those ideas.
Thank you. Go to the Global AI Playbook. Thank you for that. Tshifhiwa, have you got anything to add on before we close in terms of those questions?
Yeah, I think on my side, back to the question around data feed, I believe that partnerships is the greatest way to leverage data, especially with telcos. That's something that we've really done well on our side. So partnerships is the key to leverage a lot of data. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your great answers. Thank you for this great session, panelists. It's been very interesting and fascinating to learn from you, your perspective on AI, the risks, especially Gen AI, and the opportunities and the challenges. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for the audience for the great questions as well that you've posed today. And thanks to the Pathway Summit for this wonderful session. Good day and goodbye to everyone. Thank you.